is saying his vows in front of Preacher Doan." Mack brushed bits of iron shavings from the counter and ground them into the planked floor with the sole of his boot. In his opinion, the ones wishing they'd chosen different would be all those men who trusted a matchmaker from Newton, Massachusetts, to find them wives instead of relying on the good Lord's guidance. But he'd said all that at the town meeting, and nobody'd listened to him, the same way Uncle Ray hadn't listened to Ma and Pa, so what was the sense of repeating it? "Go ahead and send those letters, Clive. I hope it works out good for all of you." Clive shook his head, glaring at Mack in disgust, but he ambled out of the building without another argument. Mack grabbed the broom from its spot in the corner and set to work, smacking the straw bristles against the floor with more force than needed to clear the wide planks of dust. Sweat dribbled down his temples and dripped off his chin, leaving little splotches on the floor that quickly dried in the hot wind coursing through the open front door and wheezing out the back. If he didn't slow down, he might give himself heat stroke, but he had to channel his concerns somewhere, and the floor seemed a safe target. Why wouldn't the men in town listen to reason? Buying a bride was foolhardy, maybe even dangerous. The fellows in Spiveyville might not be the smartest men in the state of Kansas, but they were, for the most part, an honest lot. How could they know for sure the women who came at their request were honest? Could any woman who would make herself available to travel to a town she'd never visited and marry a man sight unseen be one a decent man would want to wed? Not likely. Some of these women could be trying to escape the law. Maybe they were women of ill repute, and the men of Spiveyville planned to send their letters and hard-earned money to a matchmaker states away without any guarantee they'd end up with a bride. Why would they be so reckless? Mack leaned against the broom's handle and sighed. He knew why. Because they were lonely. The same way Uncle Ray had been lonely. Truth be told, Mack was too. His 31st birthday had passed a month ago, and he'd operated Spiveyville hardware and implements on his own for coming up on 10 years. He wanted companionship, a family, as much as any other man his age did. But lonely was one thing. Desperate was another. Gritting his teeth, he put the broom to work again. Every other unmarried man in Spiveyville could participate in the scheme, but he wanted nothing to do with any mail-order bride. Mid-October, 1888. Newton, Massachusetts. Abigail Grant. Abigail drew in a deep breath, allowed it a slow escape through her puckered lips, and finally reached for the doorknob. She gave the oval, etched glass knob a twist and pushed, pasting on a smile as the door opened on silent hinges. Mrs. Helena Bingham's gaze lifted from an open ledger on the polished top of the French Empire desk and settled on Abigail. Disappointment instantly sagged her lined face. "Here you are again." Abigail lifted her chin, even though her pulse thrummed in an erratic beat. She dropped her valise next to the doorway and crossed the cabbage rose carpet, the fraying hem of her deep russet skirt grazing the thick fibers. "I assure you, there was no other choice. The situation there was—" Mrs. Bingham held up one hand, reminiscent of a courtroom judge. "Let me guess. Deplorable." She raised her snow-white brows. "Yes?" Abigail pursed her lips. The woman needn't use such a sarcastic tone. She tugged her little travel hat from her head and dropped it on the desk. A wavy strand of hair, defined as mink brown on her summary sheet, slid along her cheek, and she pushed it behind her ear with an impatient